Okay, for everyone who's just joined, welcome. Hopefully you can hear me all okay. Please raise your hands now if you can, and we will hopefully make a start in a few seconds. Hopefully as well my screen's coming through all okay. So we'll make a start. So in today's webinar, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a look at some of the things that we can do with the Power Platform, particularly when it comes to trying to sort of meet your cloud data integration needs using the Power Platform. So we'll start off first of all by just outlining the challenge that we've got when it comes to approaching the Power Platform for the first time, and what sort of constraints we may find as a consequence of being sort of attached to our on-premise environments. We'll give everyone just a bit of an overview of what the Power Platform is for those maybe who are a bit new to the subject and touch upon some of the core features in there. We'll then move on and look at some of the various different integration capabilities that we've got on offer as part of the platform. We'll jump into a demo. Obviously, the best way of seeing these things is to see them in action. And then we'll round off at the end with just a dedicated time slot for Q&A. But feel free to sort of put any questions that you've got in the chat throughout the presentation. And we'll try and get round to them if we can. So a bit of background for who I am. So hi, my name's Joe Griffin. I'm a Power Platform and Business Applications Evangelist based in the UK. I've been working with the platform for around about, since its inception really. Previous background of working with the sort of on-premise Dynamics CRM applications as it was known then. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, and I'm also happy to connect with anybody today on LinkedIn. Just feel free to reach out to me. Always happy to chat about anything to do with Power Platform or indeed Dynamics 365 for that matter. So when we start to think about in terms of, okay, what are the challenges for organizations today when they're considering a business applications solution? There's numerous sort of things that sort of come top of mind really. Obviously with budgets are always a key concern. How can we sort of demonstrate return on investment around the types of business application solutions that we're trying to get off the ground? How can we start to integrate complex processes as part of a cloud-based sort of system? How can we get that sort of great partnership in place between the business and IT in terms of getting them all on the main page? How can we sort of, overcome the issues that we've got around our legacy IT systems? It could be that we're in a situation where we've got these core business systems which are crucial for our day-to-day operations as a business, but they are legacy. They're using outdated technology, they're using outdated sort of approaches and just not a good fit, but we still need them. How can we try and leverage existing technology? How can we make sure ultimately that we're being secure and compliant when we're moving to the cloud? All of these and perhaps even more become sort of things that we need to think about when we're sort of adopting a business application solution, particularly one that's based within the cloud. And then with the on-premise dimension in the mix as well, okay, we want to be agile, we want to adopt the cloud, we want to be proactive in terms of our approach there, but we are constrained to a certain extent by our on-premise resources. So we're not in a situation where, let's say, we've got a greenfield deployment, we've got an existing, what we would term a brownfield sort of landscape where we've got existing IT infrastructure that we need to have sitting alongside our cloud, any cloud technologies that we adopt. Around that, we need to make sure that we're ticking the box around data security, making sure that things are encrypted at rest, things like that. We need to make sure that we've got good support across multiple different vendors. It could be that, okay, we've decided, okay, we're adopting, let's say, the Microsoft cloud, but we've got dependencies on things such as like Oracle or SAP or things like that. And potentially these are sitting in quite complicated, complex environments as well, not just one, but maybe many or hundreds of different servers as well. Info security becomes a big concern as well. Okay, we need to make sure that we're not, we want to adopt these cloud solutions, because of what we hope they're going to bring to our organization. But if it's going to open up a massive hole in our business and put us at risk for potentially a data breach or something like that, then we want to make sure that we're covering that off. And finally, as well, there's a mindset shift as well when it comes to the cloud as well, around in terms of how we approach costs. So traditionally, we may be used to having a situation where we're working on a capital expenditure model where we've got these big hits, every 1, 2 or 3 years when we're upgrading servers or, purchasing software and licenses and things like that. Instead, from the cloud point of view, we're actually adopting more of what we call an operational expenditure or OPEX model. And in that, we're not having those big 1, 2-year, 3-year sort of capex hits anymore. We're paying on an ongoing basis for our cloud solutions, for our cloud technology. And typically what we find is things such as licensing and all that sort of stuff is wrapped up as part of that. And that can be quite a bit of a challenge to sort of, shift away from that mindset, because on paper you may think, okay, well, I'm paying more potentially each month as a consequence. So it's all about having that conversation with the business and getting to realize, well, actually no, on balance you're actually paying probably about the same, if not actually less, by moving to an OpEx model. And I think ultimately, when we think about what's happening today in the world, when we think about COVID-19, I think cloud has sort of proven its worth to a large extent, in that it needs to be a necessary component as part of our IT solutions. We need to make sure that we've got a good collaboration tool at our disposal, whether it's something like Slack or Teams, for example. We need to make sure that we're prepared for people working in the cloud, and ultimately we need to be prepared to make sure that we're giving the people within our organization the tools they need to get their jobs done most effectively. And all of that, I think COVID-19 has really brought that into sort of frame. So what we can hopefully start to see now is maybe there's a bit more emphasis on looking at these solutions more carefully, and there might be a bit of a realization, okay, well, what we've actually got across the various different cloud vendors is hopefully some solutions that are going to meet our particular needs. So this is where we sort of bring the Power Platform into the equation. And so what is the Power Platform? So it's Microsoft's low-code business application platform that sits within and alongside Office 365, Microsoft Azure, and also Dynamics 365 as well. And it comprises of these core applications that we see on the slide on here. And these cover everything from having an application right through to having business reporting at the back end of it. The great thing about this platform is that baked underneath all of this is that you've got some really great extensibility options. So whether you want to have these sort of open APIs that you can connect to, whether you want to bring in data from different sources, whether you want to sort of start utilizing off-the-shelf AI capabilities, or finally, whether you just want a fully managed database in the cloud, you've got the tool sitting underneath that you can hopefully start to use to get you sort of working a bit more smarter along all that. But what are all of these apps on here? What can they do in a bit more detail? Well, first of all, Power BI. Power BI is probably the oldest application that sits within the Power Platform. It should hopefully be familiar to most of you today. But what it is this engaging business intelligence tool that we can use to start to get a real great understanding of our business data to drive those more actionable decisions, and ultimately as part of that, driving a sort of data culture within our organization. So really what our report developers and analysts can start to do is reduce the amount of time that we are actually messing around with data and get to what we want, which are those actionable insights more quickly, with some really great AI capabilities built in within. And ultimately what we can hopefully get is a unified platform at the back end of it. We can reduce our reliance on having maybe multiple different reporting solutions, having to accommodate different sort of reporting needs. The tools such as, let's say, SSRS or SQL Server reporting services aren't really suited for, and have that on the go type reporting. So whether you're on the web or in your browser or on your phone or tablet device, you can start to experience these really quite powerful and impactful reports. Now, a report's only as good as, let's say, the data, the applications that are sort of feeding data into it. And this is where Power Apps potentially becomes a really nice companion to Power BI. And what we can do with Power Apps is effectively start to build these low code, no code applications that sort of can be sit again within web, mobile, or tablet devices. So regardless of the type of data source that we want to connect to, we can potentially use Power Apps to very quickly build these highly sort of task-orientated based applications. And really what we're trying to do here is reduce the dependency on IT development teams for building out these applications. So really, if you're quite handy sort of building out Excel formulas, if you're fairly comfortable building out sort of PowerPoint decks and stuff like that, what you'll find with sort of when you're developing Canvas Power Apps in particular is that the experience should be fairly easygoing and stuff like that. So really what you can start to do is solve those business problems more quickly, get people doing some really amazing things in terms of building out these really useful applications quickly. And again, when you're incorporating functionality such as AI Builder, There's some really great capabilities such as form processing, object detection, things like that, language translation that you can start to bring into the equation. Now, typically, when you've got many different systems involved within your business, you'll need to try and find some way of being able to easily get them to talk to each other. And this is where Power Automate comes into the equation. So you can start to connect together your various different systems, model out your business processes within the Power Platform. So if you want to do a very sort of straightforward automation, such as, okay, when a new record lands in my database, send me a notification in my app, or build out those more complex integrations where you're talking to multiple systems and things like that, then with Power Automate, you've got the tools there to be able to do that. And what you've now got as well within Power Automate as well is the ability to build out what we call these robotic process automation, or RPA type solutions. So you can actually have it so that an entire sort of, I can record myself on my desktop going through various different stages, opening an application, logging in, adding some records on, updating a few other records. All of that can be modeled out into what we call an RPA flow, and then that can be run either sort of on an attended basis by individuals or on an unattended basis. So again, it's all about sort of freeing up people's time to hopefully do something a bit more useful with the day, and to start to automate these processes a lot more effectively as well. Now, when typically you may have your own existing databases that you want to bring into the equation with the Power Platform, so if that's a SQL-based one or something else. For those maybe wanting to have, let's say, a ready-to-go database as a service offering, then Microsoft Dataverse gives you that. It's effectively a database in the cloud. It's used across Dynamics, the various different Dynamics 365 customer engagement applications as well. So that means that if you're using those already, then you can effectively start to bolt on your own sort of custom data tables or things like that you want to build on top of it, and really you can start to extend this out so that people can maybe consume data within the Dataverse as part of, let's say, portals within Power BI reports and things like that, really. And you've got some really rich capabilities within Microsoft Dataverse. It is in effect a SQL Server database underneath the hood, but what you get is that nice managed layer in front of it. You don't have to know SQL statements to be able to build out your database. It's got good support across various different data types. You can have various different business logic trigger based on actions. You can extend it out using plugins and write C# code to extend that out. So really, it gives you that really nice managed database as a service type offering that in some cases will equal, if not exceed, the sort of capabilities that you may get with SQL Server out of the box. So if that gives you a good overview in terms of what the Power Platform is, let's take a look now at what sort of integration capabilities are on offer if, let's say, you wanted to bring in your own on-premise resource or other type of systems into the equation. Well, first of all, when you're working with, let's say, your Power Automate flows or Canvas Power Apps or things like that, then immediately what you've got access to is this rich array of different connectors. So there's at least over 230 different cloud services, file, database, web APIs, first-party, third-party vendor connectors that you can use and you can connect up to using Power Automate and Power Apps as well. So, you could be in a situation where, let's say, I build, let's say, a Canvas Power App that connects to Salesforce, as an example, connects to an Oracle database. So particularly, from a being sort of agnostic, it's a really great boon that we've got these rich connectors available on here. Even if we're not fully, bought into the whole Microsoft end-to-end story, we can still very straightforwardly bring in our other third-party apps with ease. When we're using tools alongside that, such as the on-premise data gateway, which I'll discuss in a bit more detail later on, then these can be both either cloud offerings, so it could be a cloud SQL database, or it could be an on-premise database that we connect to as well. And for those situations where maybe, okay, none of these connectors fit our particular usage or particular requirement, then we have got the ability to build our own custom connectors on top of this to connect to any potential service as well, whether our own custom API or and maybe as a company, as an ISV, we've got our own solution. We can build our own custom connector that will then allow us, not only us to connect to our particular application, but then we can make this available as part of the marketplace, and have other customers, other Power Platform users connect and use that as well. So I mentioned this already. So the on-premise data gateway is really our go-to tool if we're looking to start to integrate our on-premise data in the Power Platform. Effectively, what it provides is with this secure tunnel between our on-premise and our cloud environment. So what we can start to do alongside this is expose out our on-premise resources, such as, let's say, Oracle database or SQL Server, and we can start to use those within Power Automate, Power Apps, Power BI. And if we're also using Microsoft Azure as well, we can also use the on-premise data gateway to connect to do the same thing with Logic Apps and Azure Analysis Services as well. And the good thing about this as well is that it's not a particularly complicated setup process for this. So you can basically, anybody can sort of download and install this very straightforwardly. And if you did need to sort of scale this up, so let's say you've got multiple servers on premise that you want to be able to use the gateway, you want to increase your throughput or provide that sort of disaster recovery capability, then you can also scale out your on-premise data gateway deployments as well across multiple machines or environments, depending on what your needs are. So moving on now, so when you want to start to get your data into Microsoft Dataverse or even tools such as Azure Data Lake Storage, we can start to use what are called data flows in the cloud. And effectively, they're these sort of self-service data preparation tools that we can leverage to bring in data from our various different sources, get it all sort of mashed up and ready to go and into where we need it to be. And the good thing is that you don't necessarily need to relearn anything new as part of this, because what you're utilizing here is Power Query. So if you have spent some time already working with Power BI or tools like that, you can very easily get started with data flows. So whether you want to perform these sort of one-time or recurring data loads, whether you want to get data out into Azure so that you can start to do some big data or data warehousing processing, data flows give you some really great options here that you can use to start to get more out of your data and get it working and sitting quite nicely within the Power Platform. We touched upon this already, but yeah, custom connectors give you that ability to start to incorporate more specific APIs into the Power Platform and also alongside Azure Logic Apps more easily. So if it is a case like you can see the screenshot here, you've got, let's say, a custom API that you've built maybe for text analytics, you can build out a custom connector as a one-time action that can then be used as part of your Power App or your Power Automate flow, and also Logic App can use it as well. So effectively what you can start to hook in on there, so when maybe specific trigger actions or events occur within your particular API, you can then execute your flows, let's say, automatically based on that, or you can also just call specific actions that you expose out from your API as part of this as well. And as we mentioned already, if I'm an ISV, if I wanted to, let's say, get my custom connector into the hands of my customers potentially, then I can go through a certification process around that, get that all out and available as part of the marketplace or app source as it's called. And then from there, anybody in the world can go on and start to use that. So it provides me with that, sort of additional way in which I, as an ISV, can sort of drive revenue and get my solution working very nicely alongside the Power Platform. So the Power Platform, is designed to address these scenarios where, okay, maybe we don't want to have, need a developer involved, somebody with that deep technical knowledge involved. We can very easily start to build out solutions, without that dependency. But that's not to say that the Power Platform isn't sort of more, a good fit for those who have got maybe what we would sort of call pro developer type capabilities. And the great thing that you've got is that you've got this really natural and easy extensibility out into Microsoft Azure built in as part of the package that you get with this. So ultimately, underpinning all of this, you'll typically have Azure DevOps as your tool that you can use for your application lifecycle management. So you can automate your deployments, you can validate your build, make sure people are sort of automatically checking in good solutions that you're building out in the Power Platform. And then you can also start to leverage the other Azure services available. So whether you want to start to execute custom code using an Azure function based on specific trigger points within, let's say, Microsoft Dataverse, whether you want to call a function as part of your Power Automate flow just to run a bit of custom code that you need that you can't replicate out in Power Automate flow, or whether you want to maybe start to, okay, well, I've got all my data in the Power Platform, but I need to get it out into something that maybe from a developer standpoint we can more easily work with. So whether you want to get it out into an Azure SQL database, into Cosmos DB, a data lake, or into a data warehouse, or it's called Synapse Analytics these days, I believe, you've got these abilities on here, and it's not going to be necessarily too difficult for you to start to do this. So let's dive in now and just see exactly what we can do with each of these in a bit more detail. So Azure Functions, what you've got here is the ability of being able to run this sort of serverless code snippets, whether it's sort of a simple, 3-line application or maybe something a little bit more complicated. We can effectively run and execute this out in Azure. We can write it using a variety of different languages. So typically you may use C# or PowerShell, but you've also got support for things like Java as well. And the great thing about this is a consumption-based service. So we're only paying for the amount of time that our code runs sort of on a monthly basis. If we've got more sort of intensive requirements, then we can maybe look at sort of having sort of a dedicated compute that we pay for to give us more sort of high performance type capabilities, and also be able to sort of have support such as for VNets and things like that. And it becomes very easy for us to integrate this alongside the Power Platform. So if we want to process our complex actions, as I mentioned already, from Power or Power Automate, or if we want to expose out our transaction data as it occurs in Microsoft Dataverse, so as records are created or updated, we can expose out that full transaction into Microsoft Azure, work with that data, and also as well circumnavigate some of the limitations that you've got as part of executing standard plugins within Microsoft Dataverse. So Azure Functions are really great, for really sort of low volume usage scenarios. What you'll typically end up finding is that you're paying virtually nothing a month to basically run this. So if you've got, let's say, occasional actions that need to sort of be executed, maybe let's say once a month or maybe a few times per day, then potentially an Azure function is going to be very cheap and potentially very scalable for you to look at as a solution. Data export. So we touched upon this already. So we have the ability of being able to take our Dataverse, our Microsoft Dataverse database data, and push this out into Azure really easily. So, if we have decided that, okay, we want to, as much as possible, use the Dataverse as our central business database, but we want to be able to export things out either in terms of just as a backup, or so that we can achieve those sort of big data analysis of our solutions, then we can either sort of export things out into an Azure SQL database, and that will expose out sort of our tables and everything else in a fairly sort of normalized fashion. Or alternatively, we can export things out into a data lake store. And then from there, what we can also then start to do with that is use tools such as Azure Data Factory to process that data, bring other tools into the equation, such as, let's say, Databricks or things like that, and really start to, manage our data at scale, and ultimately make sure that from a Dataverse standpoint, we're storing our core data that we rely on in the Dataverse, and then pushing it out into Azure once it's sort of beyond its sort of sell by date, or in a situation where we want to perform more sort of detailed analysis on it. So all of this can be done really straightforwardly. Typically, it's a wizard type process that you follow through. You need to make sure that you've got the appropriate resources set up in Azure, but it's not going to be too difficult for you to set up these type of integrations. So you're not having to code out specifically to meet these particular requirements. Okay, so let's take a look now at a demonstration where we can hopefully see some of what we've spoken about today in action and just how easy it is to get going with the Power Platform. So first of all, I'm going to go across into, I've got a sort of a virtual machine that I've set up using Windows Server 2012 R2, and this is effectively what going to be our on-premise environment. And all I've done on here is I've installed the application that we spoke about earlier, our on-premise data gateway application. So this was just a very simple installation process. All I had to do was just install this. I had to register it with our Power Platform environment. And then from here, we've got our gateway running in the background. And this is what's providing our secure tunnel into our particular environment down here. And we've got a few options on here that we can configure. So for example, if you want to have custom data connectors, if you want to modify some of the settings in terms of making sure things execute in HTTPS mode, check the logs and things like that, all of this can be done in this application down here. Ultimately, with this installed now, I've got my secure tunnel into the Power Platform ready to go. And what I've also got installed on this machine, if I just go into SQL Server for a second. So you can see over here that I've got various different sort of sample databases that I've built out down here. So these are just the typical AdventureWorks databases that Microsoft make available to us. And these are effectively hooked up to now within my Power Platform instance and something that I can start to work with as a consequence. So let's go out into the Power Platform first of all. So here I am in what's called the Maker portal in the Power Apps. So this is the central place where I would go if I want to build out my Power Apps, if I want to work with the Dataverse. This would be the place that I go. And from here, I can actually build out my various different applications if I wanted to. So what I'm going to do now is just going to build out a Canvas app using our SQL Server data source. I'm just going to see how straightforward it is to actually build this out for the first time. So when we open the studio for the first time, we can see we get a few different options at the top up here. We can maybe start with a blank app or maybe customize for a template. But if we're working with let's say the Microsoft Dataverse, also known as the Common Data Service, or indeed SQL Server, then what I can do is actually just build an app from the data that's there already. So if I click Phone Layout down here, I've added in my on-premise environment over here, and we can see all the various different tables from the on-premise environment are being shown down here. And what I can do is I can select a table down here. So I'm just going to select my production.product table over here, click on connect. And what it's going to do is going to detect everything about the particular table that we've selected. And it's going to build me out an app that's basically almost pretty much good to go. So within seconds, what we've got on here is an application that's hopefully going to suit our particular needs. It's just refreshing the data now behind the scenes. Let's give it a second just to load. So yeah, we can see down here that it's loaded out all of our various different products. It's done a fairly okay job in terms of being able to render things out as we want them to. But if we wanted to very quickly make a change to this app, then what we can do is we can maybe just change things around on here. So as an example, I can see on here that name is being used in the body at the moment. Maybe it's going to be a bit better if we have it in our header. So you can see it's brought in all my fields over here. I can just select name on there, and then straight away we get a more useful sort of thing on there. If we maybe just change some of the properties on here, so maybe we want to have product ID on there or maybe have that as our subtitle. There's all sorts of things we can do to sort of change this around to sort of suit our particular needs. Maybe we want to put weight down there, something in there, a field. So very quickly, I can customize the application to suit the particular need that we want to do. And this is a fully working, ready to go application. So just to sort of prove this as a point, I can click this button up here. Our app sort of starts playing and we can start to work with it. If I click on HexNut 19 down here, I'm just going to grab the product number down here. We're just going to go into our SQL database and we're just going to bring this up on here just to confirm that there's no sort of smoke and mirrors going on here. So just select that down there, production.product. We can see we get HexNut 19 down there. I can edit this product down here. So maybe you just want to change it to, let's say, HexNut 23 instead as the name of our particular product. Click the submit up here. And right now it's executing the appropriate commands to be able to get the, right, so there's a duplicate key. So actually we get an error there to tell us about our duplicate key down there. Let's just change this to something maybe a bit more unique, and let's see what happens on here. Yep, so it saved that straight away. If I run my query down here, we should be able to see that we get the new name down here for our particular one on there. So what's good about that is that it enforces our database logic. So in this case, we had a unique constraint on our table. It it showed us an error message and didn't save the operation when that was sort of violated down there. And we can see that straight away we're able to connect to our on-premise data source and update it really easily. And what's even better is that we've hopefully got a fully working, maybe some little tweaks that we need to do to it, a fully working application that we can start to use within the business. And it's taken us probably less than 5 minutes to build that out. So this is the type of things that we can hopefully start to achieve with the platform when we start using it in an effective manner. So for now, I'm just going to close down this application for now. We're not going to save it or worry too much about it from here. And now we're just going to take a quick look at data flows. So data flows are those tools that we can use to bring in data into the Power Platform, into the Dataverse primarily. We can access it from down here by clicking on Data and Data Flows. And what I've got here is here's one I made earlier type thing. So we've got just a very simple data flow that we're going to use to bring in data from our on-premise SQL database into the Dataverse. And if I click on Edit now, we can sort of get a bit of a view in terms of what it's actually doing in here. So if you've worked with Power BI before, this interface on here should be really familiar to you. This is your Power Query Editor, and we can see we get pretty much the same type of capabilities that we'd expect as if we were working with, Power BI Desktop or even Power BI Online as well. What we've done down here is that we've brought in our person data from our on-premise data source. So we can see down there, because we're using our connector on-premise to connect to do this, all we've had to do is just specify the name of our server and our database, and then from there we can bring in our person data. And at this point, we've done some basic modeling of the data, just to remove some columns that we need. If we wanted to, we could do some maybe additional steps. So if we wanted to, let's say, maybe do a new column from examples over here, we can maybe just start typing in. So let's say I want to get, let's say, the full name of, let's say, each person that we are selecting. I can just start to type this in, and then hopefully it will start to recognize me. Let's just do let's just do the second row. Let's just do Ken J, see if it recognizes it. Yeah. Click OK. And then straight away, we've got an additional custom column that we've been able to add onto there and that we can then use to map across into the Dataverse when we import it in. I'm just going to remove that for now. So it's possible that we may do a bit more work on this, maybe to add in a few additional columns, maybe just tidy up our data before we load it into the Dataverse. But assuming this is all ready to go, what we can then look at doing is then just clicking on the next button, and then we get some options on here in terms of being able to where this data is going. So in this case, what we're doing is that we're mapping this data to our contact table. This is one of our out-of-the-box tables that we can use to record details about individuals in the Power Platform. All we need to do is sort of map across our various different fields. So if we scroll down, we should see there's first name. It might be that we've got more fields based on our particular needs. We can customize options, just making sure that we keep things in sync by removing rows that no longer exist in our query output. Then by clicking the next button, what we can then do is then just sort of say, okay, we want to execute this manually, refresh this manually, or we can maybe just set a schedule. So maybe on specific days, specific time slots, we're running this integration, we're keeping our data continually synchronized behind the scenes. We're just going to click cancel now because I'm not too concerned about this. If we do find there are any particular problems with our particular data flow, then we can very easily go into here and we can see all of our previous runs. We can download a log file and we can sort of use that to sort of figure out what's going on with our data. So it becomes really straightforward. As I say, if you're already somewhat handy when it comes to working with Power Query and tools like that, then data flows become really straightforward for you to look at and a real easy tool to start to work with. And then finally, what we can do from a Power BI standpoint is that we can start to incorporate our on-premise data as well alongside our Power BI. So effectively what we've got on this screen now that you can see is a very simple sort of report that's been built out in Power BI. The key thing that we've done with this particular report is that it's connected out into our particular SQL Server database, on-premise database that we saw a few moments ago. So we've been able to set this up really straightforwardly. All we just need to make sure is that we've got a gateway set up on our particular our particular sort of tenant. And then all we do is we then just specify the name of our data source. We add on the various login credentials and things like that. We can add on new data sources at any point. So maybe if we've got other databases or servers we want to add on. And if we have a look at this list here, we can see we've got quite an impressive list of different connectors available to us. So as I say, we're not just limited, crucially, to our Microsoft first-party vendor solutions on here. We've got everything from sort of Google BigQuery through to IBM, Oracle, SAP. Lots of capability on here to connect to a variety of data sources, web, text, regardless. So, we can very easily use this tool with the types of systems that typically we may have in our large scale enterprise organization. So if I go back to my report now, so at the moment this report is connected up and we've got a live connection down to our on-premise database. So anytime I refresh the data on here, what it's actually doing is it's actually running direct queries, SQL queries against our data and updating that accordingly. So if I was to, let's say, go and make a change to the data, so I'm just going to run some queries on here just to basically force a bit of a change for the data on here. I then go back to the portal and click the refresh icon. We can see that down here straight away, we've seen a bit of a change both in our pie chart and our graph down here. We can see that we've now got, based on this query, some new sales based on the query, the update statement that we've run down there. So, straight away, what we've got here is this immediacy, so even though we are on premise, there may be the expectation that, okay, we're having to wait ages just for our data to refresh. Well, no, actually, with the on-premise gateway involved and with us utilizing direct query, we can have that immediate real-time dashboard views in our cloud Power BI tool. And we're using both the cloud and our on-premise environment to sort of great effect in that regard. Giving that really nice experience to our users, a fast refresh, as we saw just then, and having it so that data is at people's fingertips, ultimately in a secure and controlled manner as well, which is really great for our organization. Okay, so this brief demo has given you a bit of an insight in terms of what we can start to do from an integration standpoint when it comes to the Power Platform. There's a whole lot more that we could potentially discuss today, but given obviously time constraints and things like that, it's not something which we can sort of go into any further detail. So let's just jump back to the slides now, just to sort of wrap things up for today. So obviously, you may expect me to sit here, given who I am. Obviously, I work with the product day in, day out. Bit of an evangelist. So you're probably going to be expecting me to be on my soapbox, sort of talking about this quite loudly. And obviously maybe sort of thinking, oh yeah, maybe it's not as great as you're saying. Well, I think when you start to look, I guess, independently in terms of what's actually going on with the Power Platform, actually, it's not just a case that I'm the lone voice sort of saying this. So as an example, Microsoft at the moment consistently remains a leader when it comes to low-code application platforms, by independent organizations such as Gartner. They're also and continue to remain a leader in the analytics and BI platform category, and they've been a very comfortable leader, far ahead of the competition such as Click or Tableau in that category and being a leader. And at the moment, Microsoft are also doing particularly well in other categories as well when it comes to RPA and things as well. So really, Gartner are rating them far ahead as a leader and consistently the sort of the vendor of choice to go to when it comes to these solutions. As it stands today, you've got in excess of 3 million monthly active users across the various different Power Platform applications, so a really great user base and a really great community of individuals who are working with this platform and can be sort of engaged with to sort of help you along with your journey if it comes to it. And you've got some really interesting and quite impactful customer stories that are happening. So there's links to these on the slides on here. They're well worth a read just to sort of see in terms of what other organizations are doing. The Heathrow Airport example is a particularly good one to look at, especially when you look at the story of Summit at Heathrow Airport. You had essentially a guy there at the airport. He was a former security officer, He saw an opportunity to start to use Power Apps within the organization, and he was able to achieve, quite a sort of remarkable transformation as a consequence. Reduce the airport's reliance on paper-based processes, get them into the 21st century, and ultimately, as an individual for himself, further his career, and start to do something more useful as opposed to just the boring day job. So I really would recommend that you check out the Heathrow Airport customer story. It's quite useful in giving you some inspiration of yourself. So in closing, then, how the Power Platform, I think, is definitely something that you should consider. If you've got that desire to start to build out these more rapid business applications, potentially it can be a great tool for you to turn to. And if you are wanting to start to reduce your reliance on on-premise resource, or indeed find a happy medium between the pair of them, then it's a really good choice to go to. And hopefully, as we've seen with some of the tools available today, you can have the best of both worlds to a large extent. You can have this really modern, constantly updating, constantly innovative business application platform, and you can also still use your existing IT systems alongside that. So if you have got, let's say, a legacy application that you want to get shifted, but you still need for the time being, but you want to have this great stuff that we've just spoken about today, the Power Platform can unlock that for you and hopefully get you to a more positive state of play. And regardless of whether your solution is relatively simple in nature or a bit more complicated, then the Power Platform or indeed something else within the Microsoft Cloud Stack is going to give you that route to be able to meet your requirements. So whether it's trying to do sort of a low code type deployment, or wanted to go a bit more deeper and have professional developers involved building your solutions, then you're going to find the tools within the Microsoft Cloud Stack to be able to help you along in that journey. So yeah, thanks once again, and hope you have a great day ahead. Thank you.